All right. My guest today is Justin Rushing. Justin is the co-founder of HBCU Collaborative, and he has a lot of irons in the fire. Like we talked on our first call, you're board director at Alternative News Weekly Foundation, board member at Daylight San Diego down there in San Diego, and you've got a pretty cool kind of background in the space, the media space, local media space. So, Justin, thanks, man. Nice to see you again.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this platform. Looking forward
Yeah,
to
yeah, no problem. I kind of talked a little bit about what you do, but I like starting the show, just getting people's own take on tell me a little bit about your background and kind of like your story of your career that's brought you up to where you're at now.
Yeah, sure. Initially got into this work of local news media specifically back in 2010. That started with working at a EW Scripps property in Memphis, Tennessee, the Commercial Appeal. I got
Nice.
into this work by way of advertising, starting off as an advertising rep, being given a book of business, having to meet quotas, having to manage those accounts, and quite honestly, have been doing that and everything on the revenue side since then. Since leaving the Commercial Appeal, I transitioned over to the alternative news weekly industry and working for the Memphis Flyer in that same capacity in advertising. Worked there for a few years, and then I transitioned into the third-party automotive space and worked for Cars.com, which was a tremendous experience. Really, in my opinion, really gave me some foundational things outside of the news media space that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and really looking at the ingenuity behind sales and how product interfaces with sales, and just the overall intelligence behind it. And that really helped me and shaped me tremendously, to be honest, as well as, my two previous roles. But, that gave me an opportunity to come back within the news media space. I was offered an opportunity to come back to the Memphis Flyer as the advertising director. And then so I worked in that capacity for a few years as the advertising director there. And then the Daily Memphian launched. And the Daily Memphian was in a position, at that time, nonprofit news organization, which is one of the strongest in the country, in my opinion, just based upon its foundation and how it incepted. I initially went in as more of a business development manager, but slowly transitioning to advertising director and having built out the overall infrastructure for that organization and how revenue is generated. Worked there for a few years, went through the COVID times there, and then post COVID, I transitioned to San Diego and I went to work at iNewsSource, which is an investigative journalism organization. Small company doing great work there. Great work here rather in San Diego. Truly enjoyed working there, and it helped me be able to learn the city in a few different capacities in regards to things that I was tasked with, which my job was focus on, organizational growth and strategic growth from a audience engagement standpoint and a traffic standpoint. And after that experience, I segued into more of the journalism philanthropy world and working with the Pivot Fund. I took a role there as the chief revenue officer there. And through that experience, I think really has shaped me to do what I'm doing now, with the work with the HBCU Digital Media Collaborative. And so that's been the journey from how it all started to where I'm at today.
That's awesome, man. It's funny. I knew a lot of that. I guess I didn't look in hard enough. I didn't know you were at the Commercial Appeal. I had somebody else from there on this podcast not too long ago. That's
Cool.
fun. I don't want to misquote who is. I think it's Mark Russell.
Yeah.
Was he
Yeah.
from? Yeah,
Yeah. Mark
yeah.
is
He
there
was on
now.
the podcast.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
Mark is there now. Mark and I we didn't intersect being there at the same time.
gotcha. I wasn't sure. I didn't know. I couldn't remember how long he'd been there or what. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's cool. That's
but,
funny.
the founder of MLK 50, Wendy Thomas, was there when I was there, early in her career as well.
Very cool. We had like our kind of pre-record call, and definitely wanted to talk about the HBCU Collaborative. I wonder if you could just talk about that organization a little bit and kind of the mission and what you guys are doing there, because it's a pretty cool story,
Yeah, yeah,
cool
yeah.
mission.
Yes. Yeah, sure. So I can give you the soup to nuts story. Myself and my fellow co-founder, Michael Grant, we worked together across several projects within the industry, and it really started from a conversation that we were having. Both of us having worked in local news media for, at that time, roughly 14, 15 years, and really understanding the task of working with local news publishers, understanding where the industry is going, and still being heavily visible and involved in that work. We're having a casual conversation one day, like if if you could do anything in this industry, what would it look like? And we both kind of leaned into what was passion for us, but also where we thought we could have the biggest impact. And we both landed on HBCUs. We both graduated from HBCUs. I graduated from Alabama State University. He graduated from Grambling State University. And really, in launching this, we looked at it from a few different vantage points. Michael led the O&A HBCU fellowship for 10 years, having the chance to build relationships with students and truly understanding, their perspective from classroom to career. And, our journeys were different as, individuals. Michael was the student who was able to be exposed to internship opportunities and applied for them and landed them. I was a student on the other end of that spectrum that, not to say that I didn't have the exposure, but didn't really put a lot of effort into it, to be honest with you. And, I took it as part of my pathway to graduation. But, I know and we know that there are a lot of students who are on both ends of those spectrums and trying to figure out where they fit in, what they want to do, how they want to do it. And, the reality is that a lot of those opportunities start on campus. Students have to be activated. And then so we started looking at, what campus publishing looked like for a lot of these campuses. And, no HBCU is created equal in that, right? I think a lot of HBCUs have some very strong engagements and activations across their campus, some of which operate completely independent of the department, communications or media or journalism if they have it, which doesn't create a lot of inroads for the students. And in some instances, you see where there is a student publication and then there's a separate publication. And so we looked at that as a true opportunity, to be honest, to really be collaborative partners with campuses, to really expose them to the insights that we have into the industry and really give them more perspective of how students can grow, a career trajectory. But it all starts with being activated on your campus. If you're not doing the things that will help you land the job, especially, with how competitive the industry is now, it becomes harder for these students because they don't have a pathway. So that really was at the heart of our work. But another piece was really looking at, the legacy and the heritage behind HBCUs. A lot of that starts within, the campus publishing, and it's documented, and really want them to understand the history that comes with that and how they can preserve that, but also innovate it and keep it going. So that was the biggest motivation for us doing this, and launching this organization. Today, we work with roughly 8 campuses directly. And through that, we built out some really dynamic programming to help engage the students, and we're continuing to grow that, of course. But yeah, I mean, that was the heart of the work itself, and truly wanting to be able to go back and really work with campuses and students, who look like us, who are doing similar things, who have aspirations to do similar things, to really provide resources to them.
That's great. And just I'm not sure if you said it in there or not, but just in case somebody's listening who's unaware, HBCU is historically Black College University. Is that what
Correct.
the
Correct.
acronym is for? Okay,
Mhm.
okay. Just in case anybody, I don't know, in case somebody's listening who was unaware. That's really cool. I saw this quote from who was it? This guy a while back, Matthew Prince, I think is his name. He's a billionaire. I think he's the founder of Cloudflare, but he's interested in local media. And he was saying like something that maybe a lot of young people don't even think about as like as an option. Like working at a local news outlet. He's like, hey, you're not going to become a billionaire like me. He said something along these lines. He's like, but you can live an incredibly fulfilling life and like be a part of the community and all
Yeah.
this stuff. So I'm not hyper aware of the work you're doing, but it kind of seems in that same vein. Just, I'm sure a lot of younger people don't even think about it as like a career choice or something like that now.
You'll be
Um,
surprised. I've been
one,
really surprised with a lot of
yeah,
students that we get a chance to interact with. I mean, honestly, like a lot of them are so far along than I was at that time. As a
yeah,
student, I came into this industry really not knowing what I wanted to do. And it was that internship that I took that really exposed me into what I did. And I'm still very grateful for that opportunity to this day. And I talk about it a lot to students as well as partners that we work with when it comes to our work. I was fortunate to get this last minute internship through someone that came to our campus, and he was the GM of a Clear Channel radio station. and talked to him about, internship opportunities there because I needed it. But, I also knew I didn't want to work in radio. And I was very adamant with
Right.
him about that. And, I think through me being adamant about it, he was like, well, do you know what it looks like to work in radio? And I said, well, yeah, through the lens of working at my campus radio station, which was a jazz radio station. And the only benefit I got from working from that station is that I became a jazz enthusiast. I got a chance to pick the music that
There
was
you go.
played. But I knew I didn't want to be on air. I knew that I didn't want to run a control board, just the anxiety of messing up. And, I didn't want that. And so he was like, well, take this internship, I give you an opportunity to really shadow every department. And by the time of your internship, you would have decided what you wanted to do. And so did all of that. At coming towards the end of my internship, I think I had like maybe 3 or 4 weeks left. And, I noticed this group of individuals that would be there in the morning. They were the best dressed. They had the nicest cars. It seemed like they came and went at their leisure. And I was like, well, what do they do? And he said, sales team. And I said, well, let me shadow them. He was like, well, no, you can't shadow them. Clients, they can't take you on client calls with them. They're transacting business, this, that, and the other. And I reminded him, you did tell me that I would be able to shadow every department. And he said, yeah, I said that. And he was like, well, you don't want to do sales. Like they get paid off commission. You want to earn a check coming out of school. It's hard work. And that was like the worst thing he could have told me because it was almost like you telling me I can't do it. So now I have to prove a way or show a way that I can do it. And I went back to a professor I was really close and had a good relationship with and told him what the guy said. And he said, do you really want to do it? And I said, yeah, And he said, well, your first job is to sell him. And if you can't sell him, that should probably tell you if it's for you or not. And I thought about
Right.
that. And so we talked about a game plan on how to do that. He said, so this is what you're going to do. You're going to go down to City Hall. You're going to get a list of the newest businesses that's opened over the last 90 days. 9 times out of 10, those sales reps have accounts. They haven't called on them. And so you would ask him if he would let you sell these businesses that are unclaimed. And then you negotiate what a commission percentage would be if you sell anything. And I said, okay. And I presented this to the gentleman. I think at that time their sales reps were getting paid 14% commission. I asked for 7%. And I ended up selling $7,000 in advertising and being offered the
Nice.
job. And I was like, well, I don't want to work in radio, but I continued to work in advertising, for the rest of, my career. And if it wasn't for that opportunity, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't have had a glimpse at this industry. And honestly, if someone would have told me some 20 years ago that this is what I would be doing, I would have laughed at you because I didn't know it existed for me. And that's a big reason why we do what we do, because the tenets of our organization is access, exposure, and experience. Students don't know what they don't know if they don't have access to it. And the same thing from exposure. They don't know what careers look like. They don't know what professionalism look like if someone doesn't present it to them. And if they don't have the experiences on campuses to truly be involved and truly be able to, to be in position to do these things, they can't grow a passion for it. And so that's a big part of our work.
That's great, man. It's fine, and I want to get into some of that kind of sales-minded stuff, revenue stuff in a bit. But just the story he told me when he's like, you don't want to work on commission. You just want to check." And that was the worst thing he could tell you. I have preschool, 2 preschool boys. I believe you have a toddler.
Yeah.
I think anybody in our shoes right now is like, don't tell them they don't want to do that, man. Come
Yeah.
on, man. This is the first. They're just gonna be like, no, I'm doing it now.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm not calling you a toddler,
No,
Justin,
no,
but
no, no.
I get the
mean,
impulse.
but truthfully, it was the worst thing he could have told me because,
Yeah.
I'm a very self motivated person, but whenever I feel that someone else is doubting the capability that I know I
Yeah.
possess, I have to prove you wrong. It's a gift and a curse because you tend to bite off more than you could chew in most cases.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I'm glad that that was the conversation, because if he would have just said, yeah, go do it, because it's really not for everyone. I will say that. I know some good people who've worked in sales, they tried, but they just weren't good sales reps. I managed some, and it's okay, right? It's definitely not for everybody. So I can understand the apprehension in telling someone who's looking to graduate and find a job,
Mhm.
go this direction. But, it's been very rewarding for me. I've lived years with a lot of anxiety around quotas and so forth. But, it's been a very fulfilling and rewarding career.
So I do want to dig into some of that stuff you were talking about, the sales, the revenue side stuff.
Mhm.
But real quick on HBCU, now that you've kind of explained it a little bit more to me, you talked about activating, younger people on campus and, helping them out, see what this career looks like, what these careers look like and everything.
Sure.
And, it's kind of early on. I think it says on here it founded in 2024.
Mhm.
Um, what does that look like in practice? Getting to campuses, talking to these. I keep wanting to say kids. I'm trying to say young people. I'm feeling old, so I call like 18-year-olds kids these days. Like, educating them like in practice. How are you doing that?
Mm.
And what have you learned in the last 2 years since you've been doing it? For anybody else out there who may be talking to a younger person thinking about getting into this field, does that
Yeah.
make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we were very guerrilla with our approach and very grassroots. We wanted to build direct and organic and intentional relationships. So a lot of our work started with the campus departments and understanding who the deans were, understanding who the advisors were, getting a sense of their programming and what they offer students from a curriculum standpoint, but also the opportunities around the campus and how students were engaged. And so there was a lot of direct outreach there because ideally we wanted the campuses buy-in. We weren't coming to do this work to say that we can do something better than what you're doing. We wanted to position ourselves as a collaborative partner, as a resource to the campuses. And so that's kind of how their work started in becoming familiar with their students through the work that they were doing hands-on and really understanding the challenges when it comes from a faculty advisor standpoint on what they do and creating opportunities for students and engaging them. So that's kind of, I would say, at the foundation of it. But once we get access to the students, it's truly trying to get an idea of what they want to do and how they want to be involved and how they see it. And so I guess the clearest example I could give you is with Bowie State University. Bowie State University, we had a chance to work with two students there. At that time, one was a senior, the other one was a junior. And these are students now. They brought together 20 of their other students and decided that they wanted to create their own campus publishing outlet. And they did so. And where we were able to come in and help them was to really stand up their website. They had a website, but it lacked some ingenuity. It lacked some industry nature things that we could help cultivate and really work with them directly on. And, they were sponges. They wanted that information. They already had an idea of what they wanted. We helped formulate that. They were already doing great things, and so we were able to meet them where they were as far as what they needed in resources. And the campus advisor green lighted that, and supported us in that effort to work with them directly so they can get the most out of it. I mean, everything from helping them identify coverage area sections, helping them understand like page taxonomy, user engagement around their website, things that they probably haven't thought about that, we have insight on and working in the industry. And, we launched their website and, one of the biggest things that, those two students who led that charge they wanted to build something that they knew that they wouldn't have much of an opportunity to be involved in, but, they took great pride in, developing it. And, it's something that they built that other students can benefit from that they didn't get a chance to benefit from in true activation. And so that launch meant a lot to us as an organization because of, how hands-on it allowed us to be, with the students and being able to understand what they wanted. And, going back to this career and this pathway, we come across so many students that have a great passion for journalism. They have a great passion for investigative reporting, culture reporting, storytelling, and they're doing it. They're already doing it, and I think, to me, that's the type of thing that is a bright spot for the industry, but also a blind spot. And, I say that in the sense that these students are already cultivated into being multimedia journalists. Like they don't have to be taught to be a multimedia journalist. And there's no shade against, any veteran, journalists, but the industry has evolved a lot. And so these students come in with that, intuition because they grew up in a generation of participatory media. They know a lot of these nuanced things that really can't be taught. It's more behavioral, right? But to adapt it real time and understand, what their campuses need, what the conversation should be on their campuses, how to drive campus conversation, but also letting that be reflective across their campus reporting. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but
Yeah, no.
that That's kind of what the insight is beyond them being activated. And you find on some campuses or some students in doing the reporting, they don't necessarily see having a campus paper or a website being the primary option, right? There's so many student-led podcasts across HBCUs that are covering sports more closely, covering more campus life more closely. Even, I had a student that we met through our program that attends North Carolina A&T that's doing docuseries type storytelling about things that are going on campus. So it's just very insightful to know that these students, they're not waiting to do it. They're learning how to do it real time. They're actually doing it. And, the resources that we could provide them or the people we can introduce them to can only help them become better at them.
That's great. No, that's fantastic. Very cool work. So it's heartening to see these kind of things popping up, and people like you doing stuff like this. I'll pivot a little bit here because kind of one of the core things of this show is
Mhm.
about sustainability, actually having good businesses. As
Right.
the local media system is kind of compressed over the last 20 years, I guess you could say. And you have very good insight, like you said. And the story you told about, your internship and shadowing everybody, and then as soon as you see the guys in the fancy cars, it's like, oh, that's the sales guys. And it's like this thing, it's like this firewall between editorial and business side and a lot of business things. And I just think one of the themes of the show is that needs to kind of go away. In a lot of cases, people need to blend a little bit, be
Yes.
kind of more aware, especially smaller, local news outlets with just a few people. So I'm curious just what you think in the business lens people should be focusing on in 2026. You've got a sales background.
Yeah.
Now that I'm saying that, that feels like a very vague question, but I'm just curious if you have any insights on that for anybody out there. Yeah.
And the question is, what should publishers be thinking about from a business sense in 2026?
So you've had multiple roles in revenue and advertising and like revenue facing positions
Mhm.
and everything. What trends have you seen over the years, like now, in terms of what people should be focusing on in terms of literally, hitting the cash register? I know you spent time in advertising. There's also, there's events, there's
Mhm.
sponsorships, there's nonprofit stuff, there's all kinds of things. What do you see? Um, yeah, like I said, what do you think people should be focusing on going forward? What do you see declining, maybe with the rise of AI and everything like that? Does that kind of clarify it a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
bit?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
no, no. Honestly, I think it really depends on the publisher when it comes to, where they are, with their organization, because it's not a one size fits all approach. And I guess having done this for a long time and have several conversations, I actually still consult with a lot of local news publishers, but just conversations in general, there's not a one size fits all approach. What may work for one publisher may not work for you, but you truly have to understand why it won't work, right? And it's like, you have to understand your audience. You have to understand how to monetize your audience. You have to understand revenue readiness. But then also you have to move away from the transactional nature of just doing business. I mean, advertising is very transactional, but is
Hmm.
equally relational, because if you don't have the relationships, if you don't have the trust, if you don't have the honesty, but more importantly, if you don't have a product that resonates with the buyer, if you don't have a captive audience that they can reach, then that's going to be challenging. I think that may be true of more people, more publishers, if you will, who do have smaller audiences, who don't have the bandwidth to have a sales team, which makes it even more challenging. So I think you have to be really, really strategic in how you want to approach revenue, because it's not a one size fits all. I think it really starts with your overall strategy, right? Organizationally, like, how are you going about your work? How intentional are you? What can you monetize? What about your audience is worth someone reaching? And so I look at those things. So I think from an industry standpoint, looking ahead, it's been so many things that's been the flavor of the month, and those things come and go. And I think as a publisher, you have to really accept things that make sense for your model. If you have a strong brand, right? And let's say you may have a very small audience, trying to stand up a subscription model may not be the thing for you. But
Hmm.
because your brand is so strong, community events may be, doing events in the community that bring people together to continue to catapult your brand and then give you that front facing opportunity to share your brand story and connect with people in a tangible way, that goes just as far as a page view, because now you can help people build more organic affinity around what you're doing. You're front facing in the community, you're building connectivity, and then that creates an opportunity for you to do more events like that. Now again, it comes down to your organizational bandwidth. Can you as an organization do an event? If you can't, then you need to look at a different alternative, right? But if your brand is your strength, monetize your brand. If your audience is your strength, monetize your audience. And to me, it's really more logistical than it is transactional. And even at this point, more than relational, because you have to be able to go out and talk to people about what you really can do, what the value is, and make that stick. And then from there, you can develop a revenue strategy. One of the things that, I've seen over the past few years within the industry is that, a lot of local news publishers, we attach ourselves to the community, but how intentional are we in being in the community? I think so much can be developed from a revenue strategy through doing, surveys to your community, being in the community, being visible to them, because that allows you to identify things that you can do through your platform from an engagement standpoint that could yield revenue. And so I just think it's more than just the nature of what we know to be in this industry is people will buy ads from me because I'm local. Ad buying follows the consumer journey. You want to spend your dollars where people are looking. And it's not saying that people are not looking at local publishers. It's just local publishers have to work a little bit harder to get people to look at them. And that means their sales team
Mhm.
have to work a little bit harder to sell that. And so, like the rubber has to meet the road, and I heard a cliche a long time ago, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And I think that a lot of publishers put the cart before the horse. We need to make money. We need to go hire an ad rep. But if you don't have any infrastructure to how things can be sold, if you don't have a book of business, if you don't have these things, no, you don't need to hire someone to go sell something that doesn't exist. You need to bring someone in who has acumen to help you make it exist, and then you build from there. So it's being realistic about where you are as well. I think it's an abundance of opportunities out there. I mean, there are some things that have aged well in this industry as opportunities for local publishers, sponsored content being one. But through my efforts and a lot of things that I've worked on with a lot of the publishers I work with is really looking at what can you do in a sense to engage your audience beyond the content, right? And whether that's through obits, whether that's through a classified marketplace, whether that's through community forums, whether it's doing something that involves children, because there's a lot of things that doesn't intersect across publishing titles that are geared towards children who come from families that have parents that could be a reader. So it's really looking at it more intuitively. And from my standpoint, I think, the foregone thought of thinking that people would just buy me because I exist is gone. Like, it's not relative anymore. Like, you really have to build a relationship with your audience in the sense they see value, not just from an advertising standpoint or a sponsorship standpoint, but also from a readership standpoint.
That's great. I love what you said about, um, connecting with people like with kids, for example. I had Jonathan Keeling on here. He's from the Institute
Yeah.
for Nonprofit News, INN, and he said, you know, the one of the secrets of the news industry forever is that a lot of folks inside the places are like, oh yeah, we have the weather and local sports, but that's not the real, investigative, hard hitting stuff. He's like, that's what brings people there is the weather and like their kid's sports team or whatever. Like that's just like an example I thought of kind of along those same lines.
Yeah.
Get that to bring them in. And then, then they become aware of your brand, aware of all that. That's great stuff. Very cool. I've been asking everybody this question lately, so I wanted to get your take on it too, because everything is changing so much right now. It's been changing and it's just increasing and going faster every day with AI and everything like that. So I just like to see if you flash forward 5 years, where do you see both the local news industry like headed? Any trends you think might be happening, and then also yourself. I'd also like to hear where you see yourself in 5 years in your career. And once again, you've got a lot of stuff going on, but I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Um, you know, 5 years for me, down the road in this industry, I hope to have created something else that could support the ecosystem. Um, you know, uh, I want to be passionate aligned in everything that I do, around this work, because it means a lot to me, and I really want to create opportunities, for younger journalists, emerging journalists, but then also, really want to help publishers who are serious about their sustainability and longevity. So, I hope to continue to be able to do that work. Where the industry will be in 5 years, that's a very interesting question, to be honest with you. It's something I think about. I actually think beyond 5 years. I think about, and you have young children, how would they
Hmm.
consume news? When they get to the point to where they can read and synthesize and this information, I'm actually thinking that far ahead. It may be idiotic to do that, but I think we have to think that far out and work our way back. I think 5 years from now, we're going to see some significant impact to this industry. I think as a whole, the industry is still, and from my opinion, is still fighting to prove relevancy. And I think that's very difficult to do because consumerism is changing, and younger news readers are becoming more intuitive to the things that they want to consume and what's relative to them. And so it goes back to intentionality. I think those publishers who are truly intentional on understanding what their community needs from them, what their community wants from them, but also taking all of the journalistic integrity and telling the right stories will flourish. And those that don't, I don't think they'll be around in 5 years. And to be
Yep.
honest, I mean, that sounds grim, but I'm okay with that because I think it has to be a natural attrition to this industry. I mean, when you look at, and again, I don't know these figures to be true. It's just what I look at in my head. Like, it feels like nonprofit journalism is supporting the entire industry. Like, is that really sustainable? And when I say supporting the whole industry, that's not just publishers, that's JSOs as well to come in and support them. 5 years, what would that look like if, Press Forward has a limited time initially to be in the space that they're in to help, who's next to want to come in and take up that mantle to ensure that this continues to be sustainable, have a chance to be sustainable, right? So 5 years is hard for me to put a trend on that. But, I will say this, and I say this a lot with people. For me, I look at the evolution in a few different ways. I look at like it took Blockbuster to die for Redbox to be, for Netflix to exist. And you have to look at that critically, right? Blockbuster lost so much money on tapes not being returned but paying overhead, right? So if you don't have the inventory to rent out, you're not making capital, but you're still paying overhead. They go away, Redbox, same model. Well, we're going to eliminate the overhead. We're going to put our boxes in high traffic areas. We still can do the rental aspect of it. But by that time, you created a behavior that people just want to stay at home. They don't even want to take the step to come get what you got. And now you see Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, people can stream at home. And when you really look at that from journey, starting with Blockbuster to Netflix, it really wasn't that long ago.
Right.
Right? But who determined it? The consumer did. It wasn't the business owner, right? It wasn't Blockbuster. So how can we keep Blockbuster, but doing what we're doing now, right? The consumer dictated Blockbuster out of business. The consumer dictated Redbox out of business. And now it's in the hands of streaming platforms. And so I look at that being very relative to this industry. The consumer will dictate it one way or another. The reader, the resident in the community, they will dictate that. And so I think that our industry has a hard task of truly understanding what they want and understanding the way to give it to them, not just to this generation, but the generation to follow, going back to working backwards. I have a 2-year-old daughter. When she's 20, how is she going to consume news? How is she going to find information? Because how my grandparents consume news, I don't consume it that way. But who was thinking about that then? And if they were
Hmm.
thinking about that, could this industry look differently? So, that's kind of where I don't know if I even answered your question. I'm just going on a complete rant here.
No, that's a
It's very
great
good,
answer,
man.
man.
It's really
Really
good.
good.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love the Blockbuster, Redbox, Netflix. That's a great story or framing of it. It's funny to say, I almost forgot about Redbox. I used to use those things all the time. And I'm like, yeah, they're just gone now. I kind of forgot that was like an era that
Exactly.
we went. I bet I have a few of them still that I failed
You
to
didn't take
return
back. I
in
do
my
too.
20s. I think I've got some somewhere in like a box downstairs.
I do too.
That's not that I have anything. Not that I have anything I can play it on anymore. I don't think I have a DVD player, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's
Uh,
funny you say that, you don't remember it. But when I say the name, you do remember, but it was
yep.
so short lived because the
Hmm.
consumer cycle changed just that quickly.
Yep.
But they created the pathway for that cycle to be dictated. So the behavior is I want to watch stuff at home. I don't have to, go out and get it. I don't
Hmm.
want to have to go out in the rain or the cold to take the DVD back. And then so a platform incepted to make it so much easier and people quickly adjusted to that. And I think we have to have that level of thinking when it comes to consumerism, right? Around local news
Yep.
because we're fighting for the same attention that media is now. It used to be where journalism sat outside of media, right? But when you look at the
Hmm.
dawn of digital, you look at how people are consuming information, the habits and behaviors are the same. So what is going to make someone want to engage with you when they can listen to a podcast on Spotify? Or they can watch, self-development video on YouTube, or they can watch whatever some of these, seasonal shows are on Netflix. I mean, you're fighting for the same attention, right? And so we have to put ourselves in that consumer cycle to maintain relevancy. That's the only way. But then also, to me, and it's a big part of the work with the HBCU Collaborative, it's like we want people to see the significance of journalism, but also where it intersects with media. And that's a big part of our conference is really exposing them to professionals who are doing the work that can give them the insight of why they're passionate about it. How did they get into it to continue their motivation? Because it's relevant to the existence of it, of the industry and where it goes tomorrow.
That's great, Justin. This has been awesome, man. It's probably good. We've gone over just a few. I've got another call coming up pretty quick, so I should probably cut it pretty soon.
Yeah.
But this is amazing. Where, hit me with your links. Like, where do you want me to link to in the show notes? Where do you want people to go check out for you,
Sure.
for HBCU, for what, anything? I'll link to all of it up.
Yeah. I mean, please check out the website, hbcucollaborative.org. That's our main website. You can learn more about our program. You can learn more about our Student Impact Fund that we recently launched. And our Student Impact Fund is completely at the baseline of access, exposure, and opportunity, really helping students be able to take advantage and opportunity of internships, fellowships that don't offer relocation, and also helping them get exposure to conference environments to meet and network amongst professionals and peers and so forth. Outside of that, I don't really do much social media, but you can find me on LinkedIn. And that's Justin Rushing, Justin Rushing. And if anyone's in the realm of needing consulting, I do have a consulting site, which is IamJustinRushing.com.
Awesome, man. I'll make sure I'll link to all that. And yeah, everybody go check them out. Good stuff you're doing. Justin, thanks so much. Appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, man, don't be a stranger. We can do this again sometime if you have something else to announce at some point. I'd
Yeah,
love
no,
to.
I truly enjoyed it. Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it, Paul.
Yeah, no problem.